China's top diplomat in Jakarta to hammer out how both sides can build further on cooperation in trade and defense. And Professor Kerry Brown, Director of Lao-China Institute at King's College London, joins us to talk about this meeting in Jakarta. Professor Brown, thank you for joining us this evening. Of course, Wang Yi was joined also by China's defense minister and meeting Indonesia's foreign and defense ministers. The readout from that meeting from Indonesia's defense minister: tech transfer from China, cooperation in missiles, rockets, and so on, I quote him, and the holding of another drill this year under Heping Garuda. If you look at these measures, which is all we have at this point, do you see a significant step up in defense cooperation?
I think it's very difficult to say because the detail, as you've just said, is very sparse. The fact that the Chinese Minister of Defense, Dong Jun, was also with Wang Yi is significant in Indonesia. Wang Yi has actually, as foreign minister in the last 5 years, been to Indonesia 4 times. So it shows that it's a very important partner. And Xi Jinping went to the G20 in Bali in 2022. So, Indonesia is a significant partner for China. For Indonesia, I mean, it's balancing. Its President Subianto did kind of have, sort of talks with Trump and did do a trade deal with Trump when the tariffs were threatened. But as you've just said, technology from China now is a real issue for everyone. It's getting better and better. It's getting more and more important. So for me, it's just very realistic and natural that Indonesia in the region would be looking to Beijing and be looking to have, more dialogue with Beijing to work out what this incredible technology powerhouse now means for it. This is unprecedented.
But certainly not hurting Indonesia. It's significant to China, but not so significant it might pose any potential risk.
Of course. I mean, Indonesia, like every other country in the region, as a democracy, as the country in the world with the largest Muslim population, I mean, it's massive differences with China. It is not a natural ally, but it's not a natural enemy too. I mean, it wants to sort of find some space where it can enjoy the technological and economic benefits of being close to China, but not be assumed to be a sort of big ally. Now, we all know recently the Malaysian Prime Minister kind of made words about how Taiwan is not really an issue for his country. It's really China's business. I don't think Indonesia, because it, of course, has a complicated geography, it has issues around some of its territories, it will probably not be comfortable with, questioning the one China policy. It has recently been associated with what seemed to be a kind of joint operation or a joint drill just off the coast of Taiwan, although both sides, China and Indonesia, said there were reasons for this. The two, kind of vessels involved, one was on the way somewhere and one was on their way somewhere else. It seemed like an accident, but quite an interesting accident. So, they're kind of skirting by each other, but I think that Indonesia's interests are definitely not absolutely aligned with China's. It has a very different set of priorities, and it will be clear-eyed about that.
If anything, I suppose, underscores the fact that they have different interests. So Shafri Samsudin, as Indonesia's defense minister, announcing this cooperation, but just 4 months ago, the same gentleman was in the Pentagon announcing alongside Pete Hegseth, and I quote him, a major defense cooperation deal. So how does any deal with the United States measure up with any deals, little as we know about them at this point, with China?
So, I mean, if Indonesia cracks this, problem, then please tell everyone else. I mean, we all in Europe, almost everywhere, we have to recognize that America militarily is still number one and will be number one for the foreseeable future. And questioning security relations with the United States is only for the brave or the foolish. But I think that Indonesia, has legitimacy in saying there are some areas where it can use its relationship with China for a more stable region where it remains an ally of the United States. That's not an easy argument to make, maybe, but it's one that I think Indonesia can legitimately make because it has never had a conflict with the United States. It's never had a conflict with China. It's had issues with China, but I think it's got a long history of knowing how to kind of try and find a balance. And I think that it will regard its self-interest as being to continue that balance. And at the moment, of all of the priorities that America is looking at to put pressure on them, I mean, South Korea, for instance, Japan, Indonesia is not on the front line. I mean, I think it's got the space to continue doing things. How America responds to this visit and whatever agreements come out of it, well, that will depend on the detail and the implementation. But as we saw when Trump went to China in May, it's okay to use very big sounding kind of promises and talk in a very, kind of grand way. But it's really what you end up doing that's the thing. And so far, Indonesia has limited response and limited cooperation with China.
Well, the attention today is on China and Indonesia. Of course, the last few days, Wang Yi has been in South Korea. So the attention, all the headlines as well, including the scaling down of US-South Korean joint drills this year. South Korea, in this instance, in a less enviable position compared to Indonesia in terms of managing these two superpowers.
South Korea is a treaty ally of the United States. It hosts about 35,000 American troops, and it is facing an existential threat with North Korea and its nuclear weapons. So, of course, Indonesia and South Korea are in a very different position, and South Korea is literally a neighbor of China. And so it's in a very, very, kind of unique position. I think that, what we can learn from this is that South Korea is regarded as not being supportive on the Iran war, the American war in Iran. Trump has been very irritated by this. The kind of levels of patronage that he uses with foreign affairs means if you displease him, there'll be consequences. He has threatened to reduce the military links with South Korea. And of course, that has big implications for how it then is able to deal with the threat from North Korea. Indonesia is in a totally different space. But I think everyone takes note of, you have to kind of communicate how what you're doing to this American president is supporting him, or at least it is not a threat to him. You can't easily dissent.
Our final question. Wang Yi saying this is the time to seize the moment, not in exactly those words in South Korea, but certainly saying that explicitly today in Indonesia. Diplomatic rhetoric, we could expect that. But it is in fact true that for South Korea, for Indonesia and China, this is the time to seize the moment. Final question.
So China's priority is obviously the status of Taiwan. You could say that in some ways this intense diplomacy in Southeast Asia and or the whole region is ready for China to prepare maybe for the time when it might need to do something on Taiwan. I don't think that's imminent. I'm not talking about a war next year or the year after, but I think China is aware that America is in a very, very divided, maybe a declining state, and it must therefore have some understanding of what the region might do wherever to need to take action. Let's hope that doesn't happen, but I think that this diplomacy is underdriven by or underrun by that kind of core principle for China. There is the status of Taiwan.
Thanks. Professor Kerry Brown, the director of Lao China Institute at King's College London.